Thanksgiving?
Why would he say such a thing?
Well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with getting together with your family and being grateful. That's amazing. The capitalist hellscape gives you the day off, so you should do that. You should get together with your family and should channel gratitude, because that's important. But celebrating this holiday as it stands just perpetuates the lie that there was some sort of cordial relationship between the pilgrims, who were actually colonizers, and the native people that inhabited this land that is now known as America. This holiday whitewashes the very real and horrible history of the attempted genocide of the Native Americans, who are, I say attempted genocide because they're very much still here today, and they're very much dealing with the after effects of centuries of attempted genocide. If you don't believe there's an active ongoing effort to erase native peoples, are you aware of residential schools? All the way up until the 1960s, the government was stealing native children, cutting them off of their culture, and then forcing them to assimilate and into white culture. These schools were so terrible that many children died, and then they were just buried in unmarked graves that are still being uncovered right now all across the country. Even now, corporations are still attempting to steal native land and having police forces brutalize people whose only crime is trying to protect the land which is sacred. It's sacred to all of us. So much healing needs to happen for us to progress as a unified society. And for that healing to happen, we need to first acknowledge the atrocities of the past and how they affect the present.
I love how he had to make it an anti-capitalist rant as well, too. Like,
It's like, I hate capitalism. They're giving me the day off. I'm in a hellscape. I get off to eat pie and eat turkey, and I'm just suffering. I'm like, get out of here. God, this is the kind of relative that you really do hope stop celebrating Thanksgiving because you don't want to have to deal with them at your table. Like, I am so lucky in my family. I don't know about you, Brad. I think you're kind of the same camp, but I know so many people who have a little commie in their midst in their family that they have to deal with when they go home for holidays. And I'm like, no, my parents raised all of us right. We were homeschooled, so we had a good education. There's not a commie amongst us. Far and wide, all the way out to like second cousins, great aunts, uncles, pure capitalists in my family. And that's why we get along great, I think, because there's nobody insane saying this kind of thing. I don't have the ability to fact check everything he just said off the top of my head right now, but I'm pretty sure if a good majority of it were happening, given how online I am, I'd be a bit more aware of it. I don't think they're uncovering these like mass graves of children who were killed in the 1980s by the government and buried in unmarked graves. That just sounds outlandish. I don't know if you're familiar with what he's talking about.
I heard a few stories about that in Canada that made huge headlines, but then turned out to be not really true, I think. But yeah, I can't really speak to that part of it. I don't know anything about that. But I'll say the first part of it, I feel like they're just beating up on a straw man of Thanksgiving. Like, does anyone celebrate Thanksgiving and really think, yes, the Pilgrims and the Native Americans got along wonderfully? Does anyone think that? I feel like we all learn about the Trail of Tears. We all learn about the spread of disease, sometimes intentionally, to Native Americans. Like, I don't really think that Thanksgiving has this whitewashing capacity that they seem to think it has, at least not anymore. Frankly, I don't think most people think about Native Americans and Pilgrims at all these days when they think about Thanksgiving. They think about family, about getting together, about gratitude, but I don't really think it has this whitewashing crimes against Native Americans effect they seem to really be hung up on.
Yeah, and I also do disagree with this fact that it is ongoing, right? He's saying they're trying to wipe out the Native American population. No, we spend a tremendous amount of money. We basically pay people if they're Native American to this day. Like, you don't have to be that high of a percentage of a Native American to get a check from the government regularly that pays you. And then the reservations are awful because they don't have market incentives. So like, yes, they're not good deals, but we do still pay for these reservations, pay for people to live there. So to say we've done nothing to try to right those wrongs or that they're ongoing, we're trying to eradicate the Native Americans is just completely crazy. Another bone I want to pick is this idea of sacred land. He mentioned this. I can't stand this. I think it's similar to what we see happening with Israel-Palestine right now. This notion of there being sacred land is asinine. I don't think there's sacred land. Land is land. Maybe something special happened to you on that land and it holds extra value for you. That's fine. That means you should probably spend more money to acquire it then, I guess, if it's sacred. But I just wholly reject this notion that there's something inherently sacred about certain pieces of property. And that notion has led to lots of crimes against humanity. It's led to wars. It's led to many murders. And it's crazy. It's cracked. It doesn't, there's nothing backing that up. There's nothing that makes land sacred. That's ridiculous. The only thing that's sacred about land is its value to you as a person And some land might have more value based on things that happen or where it's located, right? Like land in California on a beautiful ocean front is worth more in most people's book than land in rural Tennessee, right? But that's still subjective. That's your evaluation of it. Some people would love to live in rural Tennessee. I don't know. But my point being, that's the only thing that gives land value is your subjective notion of the value it holds. And the only thing that means is, again, you should work harder to acquire it if it means that much to you.
Yeah. Well, other TikTokers were also not happy that people are celebrating this good season. So take a listen to some of these, which engage in what I think Kellyanne Conway coined as alternative facts.
Dana, Biskadmuka Nil, Audrey, and Delilah's. Happy Native American Heritage Month. As we all know, Thanksgiving occurs the same month. And it's true that 1621, the Wampanoag tribe shared a feast with the Plymouth settlers, but that is not the real reason that Thanksgiving is a holiday now. So 1637, the Pequot tribe was celebrating their green corn harvest, and early hours of the morning, English and Dutch mercenaries surrounded their tribe and demanded that they come outside. The ones who did were clubbed to death and shot. The women and children who huddled in the longhouses, afraid, were burned alive. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared that day a day of Thanksgiving. And then after that, all pumped up from their victory, went and attacked village after village, Wampanoag included, to where they beheaded the Wampanoag chief and impaled his head on a spike and put it on display in Massachusetts for 24 years. There was multiple days to celebrate these massacres, but then George Washington suggested, there should be one day. And then later on, Abraham Lincoln declared the day that Thanksgiving is now the official legal holiday, Thanksgiving. And then right after, declared war on the Sioux Nation in Minnesota. So, that is the reason Native Americans associate Thanksgiving with massacre, and when you celebrate it, you're also celebrating those massacres. And I know some people are saying, we don't celebrate the actual Thanksgiving, it's just a time to gather with family and togetherness. But if you're going to do that, you should recognize that and take time to know that your family tradition began with the celebration of the massacres of those tribes. That's all.
Thanksgiving originally celebrated the 1637 massacre of the Pequot tribe. English and Dutch pilgrims surrounded and shot the Pequot natives. Women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burnt alive. The rotting flesh could be smelled a mile away. John Winthrop, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, declared a day of Thanksgiving after the slaughter. The remaining women and children were sold into slavery while the rest were murdered. Following a successful raid against the Pequot, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the Indian savages. Next Thanksgiving, when you gather with your loved ones to thank God for all your blessings, think about the thousands of natives that were murdered on these national holidays. Truth is.
So, Hannah, does it sound plausible to you that Thanksgiving was actually invented after a celebration of a massacre of an Indian tribe, and you've just never heard about it your whole life, and this is just some history they don't tell you about in school? Does this sound plausible?
No, this feels like, I'm often in the right-wing side of conspiracy theory online platforms. This feels like the left-wing side for me. The part where she said they kept somebody's head on a stake for 24 years in a town, there was many outlandish details that didn't quite track. Also, I'm not positive on this, but Sioux City is in the Dakotas, and I would assume that's where the Sioux tribe is. I know there's a reservation around there. She placed it in Minnesota. So off the top of my head, just kind of a few things that didn't quite add up, period. But yeah, this sounded pretty outlandish.
Yeah, and so I actually found a fact check from Snopes, which, if anything, is a very liberal-leaning fact checker. And because posts go viral every year, making this argument that the secret history of Thanksgiving is that it all stems from a celebration of a massacre. Now, the massacre that she talks about of the Pequot tribe did happen. It happened in 1637, and it resulted in the deaths of several hundred indigenous people, according to Snopes. But it is not true that this is where Thanksgiving originated, or this is what started the Thanksgiving tradition, even though many viral social media posts have claimed as much, and articles in a bunch of publications have claimed about it. It's just actually not what happened. So here's what we do know. So after the massacre happened, there was a, quote, Day of Thanksgiving that was declared, and they did celebrate the victory against the tribe as they described it. But that meant something quite different than what became Thanksgiving. A Day of Thanksgiving was actually something very common that churches often declared. So according to Snopes, in July 1630, before the Pequot massacre, he described a, quote, Day of Thanksgiving in all the plantations, quote, for the safe arrival of ships from England. Another Day of Thanksgiving was declared in September 1641 for, quote, the good success of Parliament in England, end quote. So like a Day of Thanksgiving was just something they used to declare back then. It apparently happened many, many times, yet they selected one time where it happened after a massacre and are now saying that's where Thanksgiving originates from, but actually doesn't have anything to do with Thanksgiving as we know it, which was coined later in response to a different series of historical events. And they quote several historians in this article, this Snopes article, and one said, there is no question that Connecticut and Massachusetts had a Thanksgiving after those events, referring to the massacre. A lot of people did it, but to draw the connection between that and the modern holiday is untenable. Thanksgivings were a tradition amongst English people often used to mark a gift from God. The quote's usage is taking that particular Thanksgiving out of context. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of Thanksgivings. Some of them were related to military conquest of Indian people, but most were not. And several other experts said this. Another one said, when it comes to the 17th century English days of Thanksgiving, they have no resemblance to the holiday we celebrate today. That holiday was not created until the 19th century. The English Day of Thanksgiving would have been a day of prayer. If they won a victory in battle, that would have been a day of Thanksgiving, which was normally a day of fasting, totally different from a feast. So I'm going to put this down as another entry into what I like to call woke mythology. When they come up with a story or a narrative that confirms their social justice activist priors, and the facts are too good to bother to check.
I think that sounds accurate. I'm glad that we have you to fact check us on this because that was absolutely unhinged.